Scholars Program. Heather?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So first of all, thank you everyone for coming tonight. When Gulf Scholars heard about this event, it was something we were really excited to collaborate on because this is kind of what Gulf Scholars is all about, is looking at the Gulf region's big problems and the human side of that and how we can work together in an interdisciplinary way to try to address those issues. So FGCU is one of 30 Gulf Scholars schools now across Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida, and we are in the 4th cohort, and we've just welcomed our first group of Gulf Scholars students. A couple of our students are over here, Jenny and Jaylon, and then Sebastian somewhere, I don't know where he went, but these students are really interested in community engagement and getting really involved in how we solve these big issues in the Gulf from a number of perspectives. So for faculty that are here, you can also get involved in the program by designing courses that are Gulf Scholars related. And if you know any students that are kind of at the freshman, sophomore level, send them our way. We provide funding for them to work on these amazing projects and scholarship for them to study the things that they're really passionate about. So with that, I'll hand it back over, but I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. So thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask Jeannine Zeitlin and Tom James just to come up and introduce themselves and set up the film for us as we watch Rising, Surviving the Surge. You want to start?
Sure. Thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate your presence. We worked on this project for about 2 years. So we received a grant from the Florida Humanities, and we were charged with, our direction was to create a historical documentary that would reflect what the region experienced during Hurricane Ian. And we were in production in 2024 when the additional storms hit. And we knew we couldn't tell the story of Hurricane Ian without telling the story of the 2024 storms as well, because so many people were still recovering. And
my name's Tom James, videographer and editor. We wanted to tell this story for our residents and our communities here so that they can see the devastation, what happened. And we only have the potential for more frequency of storms, more powerful storms. So we need to know. And our communities need to come together and determine a resilient path going forward. We've had some wonderful engagement, community engagement with this. As Dr. Tully said, it's nominated for an Emmy, so let's go. And just a lot of great conversation. Hopefully we'll hear some wonderful conversation. Mike will lead that at the end of the show. So enjoy. Trigger warning at the beginning. So it is some devastation. So enjoy the show. Provided by Howard K. and Nancy B. Cohen, the Jack Forte Foundation, and the following.
In 2022, Hurricane Ian forever changed Southwest Florida. From the coast to the heart. As residents tried to rise from the wreckage, the storms kept coming.
It was crazy. Years ago, they used to project that Florida be on the water. You know, Florida's gonna be on the water. And you would be like, man, y'all crazy. You know what I'm saying? But now, these hurricanes are so big, it's at the bottom of the state, but it's still hitting the top of the state. It's crazy.
Tyrone Morgan's family has lived in River Park East for generations. The working class neighborhood sits amid the wealth of the small Gulfside city of Naples.
About 2 feet high.
Storm surge from Hurricane Ian breached the home Tyrone shared with his mother. Neighbors and friends rallied to restore the historic community.
What brotherhood look like, man. I appreciate everybody in the community. You see it? Yeah, you see it? This is what brotherhood look like, man.
People rebuilt their lives, replaced their belongings. But a succession of storms after Ian made Tyrone question staying, especially in 2024, as yet another monster hurricane approached.
I was one who always told my mom, like I tried to reassure her, man, like we ain't going nowhere. We're not going nowhere. We're gonna be here forever. And I'm starting to get to the point to where like it's starting to get old now. You know what I'm saying?
How do individuals confront a brutal new reality after surviving the worst hurricane of their lives.
That's my roof gone. Everything's ruined.
And how does a region continually rebuild under the threats of stronger storms and surge?
Unbelievable. There's unbelievable debris everywhere.
Can its history and character remain intact?
We don't want to lose our sense of community. We don't want to lose our collective story. So how can we keep our friends and neighbors here in a way that makes sense for them, that keeps them safe and keeps them with a sustainable lifestyle?
There's still too many people that have tarps on their roofs, that haven't totally repaired everything. There are still too many people that their hearts hurt. Our community depends on one another. We're great in that sense, but enough is enough.
There's a lot that needs to be done. So now's the time to do it.
Welcome back, everyone. A lot has happened overnight and early this morning, and unfortunately none of it is good news. As you can see the satellite imagery behind me here of a well-developed, powerful hurricane, Category 4 hurricane, approaching and almost on shore of the southwest coast of Florida.
In September 2022, Hurricane Ian developed as a threat to southwest Florida. Earlier predictions targeted landfall closer to Tampa Bay, but the track shifted south. Many Gulf Coast residents chose not to evacuate. They worried about finding hotels to accept their pets,
trying to get away from the hurricane,
getting stuck on the interstate, and defending their homes and businesses from post-storm looters.
Hi, are you okay?
Some felt safe staying because they had survived other storms. And in Lee County, many felt it was too late to leave. Evacuations were ordered the day before landfall.
But the storm has steadily, for the last 12 hours or so, been inching its way to the east, and we now find ourselves in a position of great peril in Lee County.
The storm surge predictions were hard to fathom.
These are big numbers. I haven't seen numbers like this many times in my career. 12 to 18 feet in and around the Charlotte Harbor area.
People on the barrier islands who decide not to go, they do so at their own peril. The best thing they can do is leave. We cannot, by law, force people off the islands, but we strongly recommend that they go.
Ian rapidly intensified. Rain and wind thrashed southwest Florida as the storm churned closer to shore. First responders were called off the roads. It was too dangerous to drive. The surge began to rise, swift and strong.
Now we have a truck issue, and the guys are pushing the truck out of the bay.
At 3:05 in the afternoon of September 28, 2022, Hurricane Ian made landfall as nearly a Category 5 on the barrier island of Cayo Costa. The massive, slow-moving storm pummeled southwest Florida for a full, painful day.
It is solid rain, and I mean heavy rain and high winds.
Photos and video on Twitter show cars underwater in the streets and seawater whitecaps lashing at second-floor windows of homes. The storm surge swamped Sanibel Island and coastal communities like Fort Myers Beach and Naples. Many more areas are under flash flood warnings, as Ian's predicted 10 to 15 inches of rain fall on waterlogged ground and overflow the rivers.
Hazard. Heavy rain due to Hurricane Ian is producing flash flooding. This is a particularly dangerous situation. Seek higher ground now.
911 calls stacked up.
911, what is your emergency?
How much higher is the water going to go?
Ma'am, at this time, I really do not know. Is there water in your home as of now?
Yeah. Oh my God, I've only got 2 stairs left.
Ma'am, we don't have any responders on the road at this time.
All right, so I'm going to drown. Okay. Say a prayer for me, please.
Dispatchers tried to calm thousands of callers, urging them to ascend to the highest points in their homes. In the absence of first responders, neighbors rescued neighbors. One of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit the U.S., Ian took several hours to cross Florida. As night fell, the storm was not done wreaking havoc. A bleak picture emerged.
I am sad to tell you that while we don't know the full extent of the damage to Lee County right now, we are beginning to get a sense that our community has been, in some respects, decimated.
Hurricane Ian has moved on tonight after stamping an indelible mark of death and destruction across Florida.
It will be one of the storms people always remember when they think about Southwest Florida.
Hurricane Ian seared trauma into residents' memories.
This was the damnedest hurricane that hit here in my time and anybody else's time that's around and knows anything about it. It was wicked.
The wind speed was definitely at tornado speed winds for a straight 5 or 6 hours.
But the water came with a vengeance. They came to drown everything.
The water started coming up through the floor and through the doors.
It looked like the color had been sucked out of the world.
There was just piles of mud and debris, and nothing was where we left it.
It's like you're stuck in one place and just thinking like, when is this going to be over? I feel like I'm in a dystopian movie.
The storm annihilated parts of Southwest Florida, particularly coastal Lee County. Ian also devastated areas in nearby Collier, Charlotte, DeSoto, and Sarasota counties. In the aftermath, first responders searched for survivors.
Rescue efforts are ongoing as we speak. I know that we've rescued over 600 people. Over 600 people.
Teams eventually rescued thousands of people, shuttling them to safety by helicopters and boats, since the storm destroyed key roads and bridges, including the only land access to Sanibel Island and Matlacha and the rest of Pine Island. Without infrastructure, homes, and power, people found refuge at shelters.
Thank you so much.
Those who sheltered at home shared dramatic stories.
My jacket's upstairs too.
Katie Hayes and her husband experienced Ian from their home on stilts on San Carlos Island, a small sister island to Fort Myers Beach. About 8,000 people live on the islands that were ground zero for Ian's storm surge.
I had always kind of wanted to see, let's just stay in have the excitement. So we stayed, and by the time we realized that we might not have, should have stayed, it was too late to leave. We saw floating houses going by, and everything floating by, we realized that we probably should have gone on. This too shall pass. Oh my gosh. Oh, good God bless America. Are you kidding? Keep going, keep going. Keep going. Just keep going.
Oh, they missed that coast.
Except for the tree that's holding it. Okay, that's good. Good. Go. Go. Go, 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 go. Should have stayed.
After the storm, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration visited.
NOAA came out with all their equipment, and right before they were leaving, I said, so how high did it get? And he said 18 feet, and that's from NOAA. This is Irma. It was in 2017. It was low. We barely got any from that. This is Adelia. Gabrielle was in 2001. Charlie was in 2004. Donna was in 1960. And Ian is 5 feet up.
Ian arrived at high tide, prime time for flooding. A camera set up by storm chasers captured the rising water on Fort Myers Beach, prying a home from its foundation. The surge hurled yachts and mammoth fishing boats like toys. On San Carlos Island, the water shoved most of the historic shrimping fleet ashore, with captains and crew aboard.
I don't want to witness the next. Never again.
Oh, we're trying. That's all we know how to do. And we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth. But
This right here may take this fleet out of Fort Myers.
Jackie Dean and her son, Tyrone Morgan, were in her River Park East home when the surge rose in Naples, south of where Ian made landfall. Tyrone recalled the water flooding the historically black, low-lying neighborhood in less than an hour.
So the water came in that fast. Yeah. From all four, east, west, north, and south, from all areas. I saw when the water started breaching the seawall. I saw when the water hit the neighbor's house, and then I saw when the water got to our backyard. And then I did tell my mom, hey, I think we need to pack a bag and get ready to go.
When water reached the porch of the single-story home, Tyrone and Jackie escaped outside.
It was me and another young lady that actually held on to her as we were walking through it, because she is very short. Yeah, we just held on to her pretty close, almost like floaties on your arms. When the water came in, you could see the sewage coming up, so you don't know what's in the water. It could be snakes, alligators, sharks. So that was a concern. We got to the 7-Eleven because it was more elevated, and I would say it was probably about at least 20, 30 people also up there.
The vehicle that picked us up, it didn't have no top, and we're all getting wet, and we all leaning together trying to keep each other warm, had no cover on it.
The vehicle that rescued us, technically, it just took us to the Coastland Mall, to the parking garage, and dumped us off there. And people was, sitting out there just waiting.
The fire chief later said they only had time to remove people from imminent danger. There were others to save. Meanwhile, 50-some miles north in North Fort Myers, Brian Bodie and his service dogs were waiting for a rescue that never arrived.
This is Mr. Benny right here, and he just turned 11. And this is little Minnie, and she just turned 8. And they're both rescues.
Brian and his dogs lived in a manufactured home more than a dozen miles from the coast. Ian's winds lifted, then dropped his home. When his entertainment center started to fall, Brian rushed to save Minnie.
And the wall unit fell over and hit my coffee table, broke the glass, and drove the glass into my ankle. It broke my ankle, went right through the bones and all, and actually pinned me against the floor.
Without a working cell phone or service, he waited for hours, which turned to days. Benny shared his kibble.
So I finally started making believe I was eating it, and I was just stuffing it down the front of my shirt. And then he was happy because he figured he was keeping Daddy alive. I knew that God was going to get me through there. But after the third day, I said to myself, I think he's expecting me to do something of my own to get out of here because nobody's coming.
He remembered the movie 127 Hours, about a climber who cut off his own arm to free himself from a boulder.
And I said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I started taking my leg and just moving it back and forth against the glass, and eventually got enough of my foot cut off so that I was able to slip it out from underneath the furniture.
He crawled to his car. A friend saw him and his dogs on the road and called an ambulance. At the hospital, much of Brian's leg was amputated in several surgeries. During rehabilitation, he found the unexpected.
And I looked down across the room, maybe about 20 feet, and I saw Minnie. I stooped down to pet the dog, and then I looked up at Brian, and I was like, oh, that's a really nice face. So,
like I tease everybody, I say I lost my leg in the hurricane, I got a wife. It really wasn't a bad trade.
His was ultimately a happy outcome. Others fared worse.
So much of the narrative coming out of that storm was either the forecast cone or the forecast changed or the evacuation timing, and those are all factors, obviously, but the part that everyone missed is this storm was powerful and hit a community that is socially vulnerable, and it's a dense population of socially vulnerable communities.
Southwest Florida has a large population of retirees. Older people are more at risk in natural disasters. Residents, like Mitch Pacina, he decided to stay on Fort Myers Beach for Ian and chronicled his experience on social media.
They told us mandatory evacuation on the beach, but we're gonna ride this one out. Probably made a very bad decision to stay. 16 years. Never seen a river on our street. Oh my God. Wrong decision. This ain't letting up yet. If it gets a little higher, may have to go on the roof.
Soon after came what would be his final post. His daughter said he jumped into the rushing water as his house collapsed. Mitch Pacina was 74. A Chicago man at heart, a fan of the Cubs and the Bears, and hot dogs with Miller Lite. On Fort Myers Beach, he earned the nickname of Mayor and worked as a greeter at the library. Hurricane Ian was responsible for more than 150 deaths. Most victims were over the age of 60, many with chronic health conditions. The storm stoked widespread grief. Along with family and friends, residents lost homes, cars, jobs, history, heritage. The Southwest Florida they knew. People from around the country and world saw their favorite vacation spots marked by catastrophe. Everglades City, Naples, Bonita Beach, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, Pine Island. Counties north of Ian's landfall, like Charlotte County, also sustained destruction.
This is what was the living room, the kitchen behind it.
Charlotte County has one of the oldest populations in the nation. Thousands of residents live in trailers. Their affordable patch of paradise.
Because of that affordability, we have roughly around 15,000 manufactured homes here in Charlotte County. Manufactured homes, regardless of what standard they're built to, just aren't as strong as those site-built homes. And because of that high number of manufactured homes, we saw a high level of damage from wind.
I just had this feeling of dread of what we would find when we went to work. And we did. It was really that bad. The senior community that was completely destroyed, and them trying to transport senior citizens to the mass shelter in a gymnasium where you had like an 85-year-old veteran with one leg in a wheelchair coming into this huge, loud auditorium and trying to sleep on a cot. And just being so confused. And so really the lesson is, to have housing and facilities that can handle Florida weather.
If I were king for the day, I would want site-built homes for anybody. It's just safer for those wind events. But also, less development right next to the water, which would be helpful as well.
North of Charlotte is rural DeSoto County, home to the historic town of Arcadia, along the Peace River. There, water more than wind was the problem.
We anticipated some flooding. Normally during the hurricane season, the rainy season, we do have some areas that will flood. We did not anticipate the record numbers that we got.
First, Arcadia got slammed by Ian's torrential rain and wind. Then, within a few days, the Peace River overflowed and shattered a century-old record.
We live on the other side of the river, so we came into town to check on the sites. All the roads were washed out. You couldn't cross. They started bringing in airboats and stuff to get in and out to bring us in supplies because there was no gas, there was no water, there was no food coming in.
Severe flooding impacted Northport and Venice residents in Sarasota County. This time, the Myakka River overflowed and also hit a record high.
Hundreds of people remain trapped by floodwaters in the city of Northport in southern Sarasota County.
Just very emotionally draining to see what you have possibly go down the tubes.
And anxiety only increased with news of the flooding and closure of I-75 over the weekend.
The closure of a major transportation corridor complicated recovery. The record flooding left residents wondering how to adapt.
Everything that we had done to accommodate the river, it's just a record high, so we've gone underwater.
In so many ways, Hurricane Ian was like no other storm in Southwest Florida's history, a fact the chief meteorologist for the local CBS affiliate foresaw.
I'll never forget it. That morning, 7 a.m. Wednesday, when we got the update from the National Hurricane Center that it jumped from like a 130 to a 155, almost a Category 5, I knew what was going to happen. It was going to change our landscape. I knew that people who did not evacuate, their lives would be threatened. It was a tough morning. It was a tough morning. Of course, a lot's going through my head, keeping the community safe. A lot of people don't know this, but my wife was pregnant during Ian. I found out actually when we were in the cone. She told me at about 6 a.m., she pushes me over and says, "Hey, Matt, I know you got a lot going on. I'm pregnant." And so I'm thinking about my future growing family as well.
70s for tomorrow morning.
Ian was our worst case scenario storm. It was the deadliest, it was the costliest, greatest rainfall and greatest storm surge that Southwest Florida has ever had. And it's no exaggeration or hyperbole to say that this was our worst natural disaster that our area has ever seen.
Before Ian, it had been nearly 2 decades since Southwest Florida was struck by a Category 4. That was the much smaller and faster-moving Hurricane Charlie. Most Southwest Florida residents had not experienced storm surge of Ian's magnitude in their lifetimes.
Ian has taught us that storm surge is real and it's significant, it's scary, and it's deadly. So when you have a surge that's projected, whether or not it's 5 to 10 feet or to 12 feet, it is very disruptive, and it is frightening when you see that water come in and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
Wink learned that lesson too.
So Wink goes back all the way to the 1950s, and when they decided on this location, they thought, oh, beautiful, along the Caloosahatchee. Respectfully, I don't think that they factored in the storm surge component. I think that they thought that it was going to behave like other storms. And this is not just a Wink thing, this is from a lot of locals. They had never seen a storm to Ian's caliber, despite my warning and my forecast, and they wanted to take a chance, and we flooded as a result. So that's one of the big things that I always like to tell our viewers is that please don't compare storm experiences from the past to help you prepare for storms in the future.
But without experiencing storm surge, it can be hard to grasp its immense power.
Storm surge is often the deadliest threat from a hurricane. A mere 6 inches of fast-moving water can knock over an adult.
And your ability to walk or become mobile in that situation is kind of next to none.
And there's a misconception that surge only impacts the coast.
Areas like Fort Myers, Cape Coral, they can go very far upriver. So those communities living along those rivers connected to the ocean can experience a lot of flooding too. Essentially, when the surge comes in, you're reversing that river flow.
The slope of the Gulf's seafloor near the coastline makes the region susceptible to surge.
It is a very gentle slope and it's very shallow. The best visual I can give you is try to push something heavy with wheels up a hill. It's easier to do it with a gentle slope, and that's what Mother Nature is doing with water, and with storm surge, it's easier to pile it up in the Gulf. What Ian did with its landfall is it piled up the water in a part of our coastline that curves inland. It allows for additional water to pile up.
After the water receded, recovery began. Disaster relief arrived. Workers cleared roads and restored power. Bridges underwent emergency repairs. Volunteers and survivors mucked and gutted homes and businesses. They placed the soggy contents of their lives at the curb. And Southwest Florida began the hard work of rebuilding. Rebuilding after Hurricane Ian was fraught with heartache, stress, and questions. A big one being, how would Southwest Florida change? On Fort Myers Beach, where Ian wiped out large swaths of the town, residents worried about the charm and the nature disappearing.
Nobody wants to stop progress, but there is an increasing awareness that the island is in danger of becoming a polluted paradise.
There was also uncertainty about how long rebuilding would take to complete.
What I tell people is I believe this will be a generation to rebuild. So, 18 years.
There were bright spots. In the South Fort Myers neighborhood of Harlem Heights, volunteers came to help and stayed. A couple from Minnesota with the faith-based Adventures and Missions arrived with their 4 kids and dog about a month after Ian.
We pulled into the driveway about 8:30 at night. It was just getting dark and there was no power here yet. And we were in our camper and it was 90-some degrees and 100% humidity. And we were just laying there thinking, oh God, what did you get us into?
The next morning, they began meeting residents to see how they could help.
It was just beautiful how they were all intertwined in this little 10-block radius of Harlem Heights.
There's been a lot of families that never left.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing, man?
And most of the other people are family by friends.
Hurricane Ian flooded dozens of homes in Harlem Heights.
The water came with a vengeance. It came to drown everything. And my neighbors got paranoid and they ran across the street and I brought them inside the houses and pick a high spot and let's hope for the best. I mean, the water was this deep, easily this deep.
People came here because it was higher. People actually had to break out of their windows to get out of their homes, some that were flooded and they couldn't open their doors. And some swam to safety over at the soccer field nearby, but some came to the front door and they slept here.
Like River Park East, Harlem Heights also has chronic flooding problems and was a historically black neighborhood. The community once largely housed farm workers, but as Florida grew, new development gobbled up farm fields. As building codes improved, nearby homes and roads were built up higher, which came at a cost for the families in Harlem Heights.
They've been putting us in a cereal bowl for years. But the higher they go, the worse off we are. So I don't know what the answer is.
After Ian, residents waited days for the water to go down. The Heights Foundation, a grassroots organization, became a de facto disaster relief center. Residents like Juan Vasquez began working on their homes as volunteers mobilized to rebuild.
We put them to work and they got their hands dirty side by side with us. And we got the stuff out. I mean, piles and piles and piles and hundreds of tons of debris from everybody's hopes and dreams and wishes, and everything they had was out at the curb, all ready to get picked up by the clam truck. So what can you do? Start over. So we started over again.
Juan joined the rebuilding effort, training young volunteers.
They were learning a lot of different ways of making their life a little better. Because they know they've made our lives a little bit better.
Excuse me. And in 2024, nearly 2 years after Ian, the rebuilding mission was complete.
Our end goal was to see every house that partnered with us, which was the 176, to completion. And we did that.
They said goodbye with an ice cream social.
Lots of emotions, happy and sad.
Yep. Bittersweet for sure. We are at peace knowing that we came and accomplished what we were called to do. And a piece of our heart will always be in Harlem.
Across Southwest Florida, there were other moments to celebrate. Fort Myers Beach replaced its signature clock. Iconic structures, like the Sanibel Island Lighthouse, were restored. There were ribbon cuttings, grand reopenings. And despite the devastating blow to the tourism industry, some businesses bounced back. Yucatan Waterfront Bar and Grill in Matlacha served as a disaster relief hub after Ian.
There was a tremendous amount of cleanup. I mean, our floating docks, those were across the street. One of them floated through our garage doors into the kitchen. The inside was covered in mud. It was extremely challenging, but we're finally here. I'm proud of the way this turned out.
Fort Myers Beach residents celebrated one of the first complete rebuilds to replace a cottage pulverized by surge.
1, 2, 3.
Basically, there was nothing left of it. I mean, there was a couple bricks over in the corner, blocks in the corner. I mean, it was just
A slab.
Yeah.
There was a slab left. Nothing inside.
And 7 houses on this side of the road and 7 houses on that side of the road,
Completely
totally gone.
Their new home was stronger and taller, 16 feet above sea level.
It's different. But it's different. We got some great views now. We never used to be able to see the ocean.
The couple credited good insurance payouts and the ability to sell other property for covering the cost of construction within 2 years of Ian.
You see people who are struggling to build, and that kind of makes you feel bad because, you know, we were fortunate.
The ones that did not have insurance are out of money to rebuild their own homes. We still have people living in tents. We still have minor dependents, disabled human beings living in campers on their properties. We just found out the other day that one of our clients has not had running water in his house since the storm.
Despite the help that arrived for River Park in Naples, the worries piled up for Jackie Dean.
And I'm like, well, Lord, what am I gonna do? I don't have no insurance. And then I felt bad because I had neighbors and some of them was talking about the insurance they had, and I had to admit I had none. So I was embarrassed, and yet it stressed me out because I felt like, you know, forgive me if I get a little emotional, but I felt like my mom worked so hard for this house and I'm about to lose it.
The stress led to a hospital stay.
What they said it was an aneurysm of the brain, and because they had my family come in because they didn't know what was going to happen. But fortunately, I'm still here by the grace of God.
The building up of someone's life has been much more time-consuming and cumbersome. It just took much longer than what anyone thought it would, and it's much more widespread. So I think getting people to a place where they can say, I do need help.
The unfairness of the storm and the recovery also took a toll.
So many adults, and understandably so upset, so mad, so frustrated, saying this wasn't fair. I didn't ask for this, now I have it. You know, it's just unfair that the earth did this, right?
But nothing is easy anymore. My sleep has been horrible since this happened. I wake up 2 or 3 in the morning and my mind is racing on what I need to do, what paperwork I need to address.
Christopher Moore is a battalion chief for the fire department of Cape Coral. The sprawling Lee County community with 400 miles of canals was engulfed by Ian's surge. Chief Moore worked during the storm. After several hours, he checked on his own home.
All right, coming back into our neighborhood.
Not good. 2 feet of water in the entire house.
You realize you can't do anything at the moment. There's still calls coming left and right. And I literally, yes ma'am, just went right back, went back to work. I did not get back to the house until eight days later. It was just one big humid mud pile. Fellow firefighters contacted me with the offer to help, and that was a lot. So
he was displaced for years.
I've stayed in friends' campers. I've stayed on friends' boats. I've somewhat become a nomad. I live out of a backpack. I have a few pair of clothes, and that's how I survive. This is my insurance legal paperwork. In Florida, the insurance situation is you have 2 policies. You have a homeowners, which would cover wind damage or fire damage, and then you have a flood component. Both agencies point their finger at each other. Well, that damage is from flood. Well, no, that damage is from wind, and it's just back and forth. I just now did receive additional payment from my insurance company I've chosen not to continue fighting. I'm ready to move on with life, so I am going to start the rebuild process now.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency also provoked angst. The red tape, how hard it was to get help. The obstacles felt endless. Meanwhile, property vultures circled hard-hit neighborhoods.
Even the second day after the hurricane, I had people approaching me, and people pull up, want to know, are you ready to sell your home? I mean, it was kind of hurtful right after the storm.
What did you say?
No, I'm not.
So you were nice?
Not all the time, to be honest. We're on the last waterfront, Gordon River, so I know it's not the homes. They want to tear them down and put condominiums over here. That's the reason. But to us over here, it means a lot more than that.
In the early 1960s, building began for River Park East, an alternative to substandard housing for Black workers in segregated Naples. Black residents could finally purchase their own homes.
Oh, this house means the world to me. It was my mom. As you can see the photo of my mom over there. I'm so proud of her. She was the only single parent to have a home over here. My mom actually worked 3 jobs. She got diagnosed with cancer. She was living alone, and I moved back in as her caretaker, and I've been here ever since till she passed.
In Jackie Dean's lifetime, Naples transformed from a quaint beach town to a mecca for the wealthy. Luxury development has inched closer to River Park.
So it's very valuable land and very attractive for developers. So many developers are in and around the community nowadays that it's changing in front of your eyes. Because some people have sold their property and moved on.
Jackie was not ready to give up on her home.
I want to be able, if something happens to me pass it down to my kids. I wanted to stay in the family because of my mother. They're much older now. It would always be Daisy's home to me.
Yet her son Tyrone worried about her facing another big storm.
And you know, she suffered an aneurysm after the hurricane 2 years ago. And just like we're trying to preserve those homes over there, I'm trying to preserve my mom's life as much as I can, so.
If Jackie was going to stay in River Park East, they both knew she would have to do something differently. In spring 2024, forecasters released their outlooks for the upcoming hurricane season. The news was grim.
It's official. The most aggressive hurricane forecast ever issued by federal forecasters is here.
NOAA is predicting an above-average 2024 Atlantic hurricane season.
Hurricane experts in Colorado, they are calling for their highest numbers that they've ever called for since they've been doing this in 1995.
Southwest Florida wasn't ready for more storms. The 2-year-old scars from Ian were still fresh.
Whenever there's a super high tide, it'll pull things out of the mangroves, and then you'll see stuff floating by. And we just pick it up, and then we take it out to the garbage. Just all kinds of stuff floats by.
Ian accelerated the transformation of her community, San Carlos Island. Her friend, Brett Green, grew up on the island when it was home to many fishing families.
It's in my blood. And I told Miss Waddling in the first grade, you know, when everybody stands up and says, hey, what are you going to be when you grow up? I said, well, I'm going to be a fisherman, just like my father. And that's what I did.
Like his father and his brother, he was also a shrimper. But Ian paralyzed the local shrimping fleet, known for its legendary pink shrimp, an important part of the island's culture since the mid-century. Most of the boats were put back in the water in a massive recovery operation. However, with one company destroyed, gas prices high, and shrimp prices low, the fleet was a fraction of its former self.
It's gone. So what do you do after that? So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it after that.
But you can't stop change. You cannot stop progress. But it's still heartbreaking to see everything is different. Except for that little bar right there. In that view.
Her home bar, the Dang Howdy, was lost, then found after Ian. On the verge of Ian's second anniversary, Kay's friends and neighbors pledged not to give up on San Carlos Island.
We're trying to keep it alive. Where was that? Would you leave?
Hell no. No.
I ain't going on.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
Another storm comes up. Thank you.
If another storm comes up, maybe we will build higher.
There wasn't a question of if. Hurricane Helene was on the way. In September 2024, the Category 4 storm struck Florida's northwest coast and caused extreme rain and catastrophic flooding far beyond. It was called the worst storm in a century for Tampa Bay. Storm surge also flooded parts of coastal Southwest Florida, still recovering from Ian. In fact, events for the second anniversary of Ian were called off as workers cleared roads. For Ian survivors, it felt like deja vu.
Oh, it's dripping from the top. How nice. Must be a leak in the roof. Let me get a bucket. It never ends, does it?
Less than 2 weeks after Helene, Hurricane Milton threatened Southwest Florida. At the same time, 2 other hurricanes spun in the Atlantic Basin. Emergency managers called for mandatory evacuations across the region. Tyrone Morgan scrambled to protect his mother's home before hunkering down in a condo far from water. His grandmother, Daisy Cannon, was top of mind.
We made sure we got her packed up today because if they're gonna expect us to have water in the home, we had to make sure she didn't float away, since she's already floated away, right?
He checked in with his mother, Jackie, who was visiting family up north.
I saved your mom too.
I'm glad you did. She's already stayed. All you did is brought her home.
And then I'll keep you updated.
I've been praying the whole while I've been up here, and I ain't gonna stop.
It really makes you think about living down here now. Like, I don't want to deal with the water stress anymore. You know what I'm saying? So.
Hurricane Milton raged ashore on Siesta Key, just west of Sarasota, as a Category 3. Milton spawned a record number of tornadoes across the state. Storm surge peaked around 10 feet near Manasota Key in Charlotte County. Milton's impacts stretched north to Tampa Bay, which experienced record rainfall, and south to Naples, recording its second highest water levels since 1965, after Ian. Once it was safe, Tyrone checked on his mother's home in Naples.
Looks like we might have survived in town so far, man. Just got over here, looking at the walls, don't look like the water got as high as I think it might have gotten.
Parts of Manasota Key were in ruins.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. This is such a beautiful place. We're paying the price for living in paradise, I guess.
That price was getting high for Judy Woods, who had restored her Fort Myers Beach home after Ian, only to be flooded by Helene and Milton.
Gracias, señor.
Sí. Okay, guys.
Misael is sweeping mud right now. There's mud about, I'll send you pictures, probably about 2 feet of water in the house, a little more than Helene. Thank God I have insurance, because many people don't. My premiums have got up to $14,000. So that's why I have to continue to work, so I can live on the beach.
She was not ready to leave her beloved home of decades.
If somebody was going to just say, I'm done, and they tried to sell their house, who is going to look at this and say, oh, Jesus, I'm not going there. So, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I'm here to stay. Mud, water, rain, insanity. That's it.
The 2024 hurricane season demoralized Ian victims. Some had experienced flooding from multiple storms in 3 months. Many thought they would be free from surge at least a while after Ian. It had been called the storm of the century for Southwest Florida.
The storm of the century or a 100-year storm doesn't mean that you get a 100-year break. It just means the intensity of that might not be experienced for another 100 years, but it doesn't have to be 100 years.
People are just fed up. It's sad. They don't want to do it anymore. They're like, it's time to go. So.
There's a lot of PTSD that's going on right now because of what they've experienced in the past and what they may be subject to in the future.
You just don't know what to be scared for or when.
So just every time you just have this increase of anxiety, like, oh my gosh, what if this time is one of those bad times?
Despite the recurring trauma, some positive news emerged after the storms. While many residents ignored evacuation orders for Ian, in 2024, more people listened. Milton prompted one of the state's largest evacuations in history.
You know, I think it finally put the fear in a lot of people down here to say, we better go, because I've never seen so many people on the road evacuating.
Experts credit Milton's lower death toll to evacuations and preparedness. Repeat storms taught residents and agencies, like the Inglewood Fire Department, to be ready for water. Inglewood is along the Gulf Coast, close to Charlotte Harbor.
And Charlotte Harbor, for some reason, seems to be a magnet for hurricanes. So we continue to learn lessons from one to the next, and unfortunately, we end up buying equipment that we hadn't planned on buying, but we have to have it because we know that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the next one comes.
Anxiety lingered after the 2024 hurricane season. Was this the new normal?
When you get beat up by Ian and then Milton and Helene, it does cause you to question maybe your sanity for living there and whether or not that's going to continue. There's no indication from climate model studies or anything else that God has it in for Southwest Florida, okay? We've been in a cycle of very busy conditions since 1995. There's a lot of uncertainty about how long this current busy period will continue, partly because we don't know exactly what the cause is.
However, scientists do know that hurricanes are getting more intense.
They're hitting harder, specifically in the form of storm surge is greater, and this might surprise people, more rainfall.
Well, if you look at sea level rise and hurricane saltwater flooding, we call it storm surge, that's a big problem, and that's going to get worse because of global warming.
It is an undeniable fact that we are warming. Can't be refuted. We are. And I've even seen it in Southwest Florida. The amount of record highs I have almost every year now compared to record lows, it's not even a comparison.
By the end of this century, we may have 2 foot, 3 foot, maybe more of sea level rise here in Southwest Florida. So what that'll mean is every hurricane coming ashore is going to be that much wetter and that much more storm surge flooding.
There will come a time when some of these coastal areas are unlivable, and that goes for inland areas too. But there will come a time when we can't mitigate all the risk away, and now you're just throwing good money after bad.
We're almost on a collision course because people are still moving to the state. They move here because of the beaches, right? So they want to live near the beaches. They want to live near the most vulnerable areas. So we've got to get serious in this country about improving building codes. It's probably one of the biggest things we could do to bring down our vulnerability in this country is improving building codes and improving access to affordable insurance.
Insurance solutions and resilient housing are critical as climate disasters destroy communities across the country. Scientists and engineers are studying how to adapt to this reality. Newer site-built homes constructed to withstand wind and surge can largely survive storms. Older homes, like Jackie Dean's, remain vulnerable. Elevating homes can be costly and complicated. Help is limited. Fortunately, support showed up in River Park East.
I went door to door to determine, did they flood, what was damaged, what is left to do, and oh, by the way, whether you like your house elevated. 13 of the 20 plus homesteaded homes in this community said yes. When it became a reality, I went back to those 13 homes and only one said yes, and that was Mrs. Dean.
She talked to me and she told me, what was to be expected. And she said, she let me know, don't get your hopes up because the houses are so old over here, they may not be able to do it.
If they could do it, Jackie's home would be the first in her neighborhood to be elevated with the state-funded program.
It's a neighborhood that we don't want to see just get wiped.
and big houses be brought in, because again, this is workforce. So, you know, we really did, along with many others in the community, put a lot of effort into River Park to repair those houses to make sure people could stay in those houses.
But first they had to analyze the soil beneath Jackie's home. Jackie watched in anticipation. Not long into the process, the drill hit shallow rock.
Oh, I'm just, you can see, I'm just jubilant. Now we scientifically understand what's underneath, and we've analyzed the outside of the house, which is what they're doing now, and now we know it can be elevated. We hit rock. That's a good thing.
I just can't believe it's happening. It's something I could have never afforded on my own, and to be blessed this way, it's amazing and awesome.
However, 8 months after the soil testing, the project still had not broken ground.
It's been hard. At times, I'm be honest, I felt like I don't want to go through this. I'm tired of this. Is it worth it?
One hurdle was that it needed to go before the Naples Planning Board, and quickly. Hurricane season approached. A meeting was set for April 2025. Jackie Dean missed her son, who had recently moved to Tampa.
I feel lost without him. He's my rock.
That's the issue.
The project contractor presented what was needed.
We're basically going to just lift this home straight up.
It looks to me like you're going to raise the house 7.4 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So I'm the state grant coordinator for Collier Community Foundation. And
Penny Taylor explained why it was needed.
The president of the association has described River Park as a bowl that collects the water from surrounding areas, and I think that's a pretty darn good description. And he stated to me 2 weeks ago, the only way we can save our neighborhood is to elevate it.
I think if Naples has a historic neighborhood, this is the historic neighborhood.
Hear, hear.
The board chair asked the association president if the community was advocating for city funds to fix the infrastructure.
Oh, we're definitely doing that. It seems to be falling on deaf ears. But if you haven't fixed the infrastructure for an area that's been there as long as River Park has, they have been neglected in every way.
The discussion shifted back to the homeowner the board could help.
Would Jackie Dean like to speak?
I'm only, if I take off the shoes, I'm 4'11". When the water came into my house, it was up to here. And I was so stressed out because my mom in 1962 purchased that home. So I'm asking, and don't want to say I'm begging, but I hope you guys make this dream come true for me, because it would be an everlasting dream and the most memorable thing I would have of my mother, Daisy Cannon.
The board soon voted.
Member Mayor?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
The next step was the city council, where it also won unanimous approval.
Mayor Hyman. Yes, this is a fantastic project, and we look forward to this success.
Jackie's dream was coming to fruition.
May 12th, mobilization, boots on the ground. Yeah, so just get it going.
We'll get her going.
I know my mom's watching. I know she's happy. And they're doing this for me. And in the future, I hope they're doing it for a lot of others in that neighborhood. Mine is just a start. Are you filming me now?
Yeah. How are you?
Have you seen the blueprints?
No, I haven't.
Would you like to see them?
Yes, I would.
So here's going to be the front of the house on elevation with your stairs and the front porch.
What's going on, you guys? I didn't see anything. Can you guys show me?
It's really not that many stairs to be concerned about.
Okay. Again, I can't thank you guys enough for what you're doing for my mom, but not only my mom, for what you guys are doing for the community. It gives the community hope.
Bye, I love you.
Thank you.
And you know, everybody asks me, what about all the stairs you got to walk up? Hell, I run up the stairs. I don't care about the walk. I'm going to be running up the stairs. I can't wait.
Funding for this program was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities, with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional support provided by Howard K. and Nancy B. Cohen, the Jack Forte Foundation, and the following.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. That's like the fourth time I've watched it, and it still remains impactful to me. I grew up here, so the idea that, we took for granted that we wouldn't have a storm like that. At least I did, because I lived here a long time. And now we know that a storm like that can happen. It's not like a theoretical thing, it's a real thing. So we have a diverse panel here in terms of backgrounds, perspectives. I would like each of you, for starters, to just tell me what you were thinking and feeling as you were watching it, both just as a person who's lived here, but from what your area of expertise is, because different people will kind of see things through a different lens. So let's start with you.
Thank you for having me here. My name is Johane. I'm sure many of you struggle to pronounce that. In fact, I started here at FGCU in the fall 2022. So I was 3 months here already, and I had to go through that. So you
got here just before that?
Unfortunately. Yeah, so I'm an environmental economist, and as an environmental economist, it's my job to follow the money, right? So what the money is telling us is that risk tends to be systematically undervalued in Southwest Florida. When you have people rebuilding in flood-prone areas, when you have insurance companies leaving the market, when you have billions of dollars being spent on recovery costs instead of millions of dollars in prevention, that's a market signal screaming at us, right? The economics are pretty clear and straightforward. Adaptation is much cheaper than repeated disasters. So the question then is going to be whether we are going to make that uncomfortable decision now to avoid catastrophic costs in the future. I think that's the question we're facing here in Southwest Florida.
I have follow-up questions, but I'm going to let everybody else say their part. So Dr. Felke, you come from a social services background, aging population. What were you thinking when you were watching it?
Yeah, I remember sitting at home at the kitchen table because my wife actually works for the county. So she was in the emergency operations center from days before to 6 days after. And so I can clearly remember sitting at my kitchen table trying to figure out, is everything going to stay on? How are we going to coordinate this? Because I do all this mapping work, trying to map out disaster relief efforts. So watching this, I get that same sense of kind of angst about, is everything going to stay on? How are we going to mobilize? How are we going to get the volunteers together? Because we went through this with Irma, and we went through it with the tornado that went through Iona. And so trying to lean on that. But I also clearly remember sitting at that table the day after the storm, and my wife sending me a text message from the EOC saying, we have 150 hot meals and we don't know where to send them. Where should we go? And my response being, why are you calling me? Right? You're in the EOC. Right? And that immediately kind of signaled to me, we've got a problem. And we've got a problem beyond the fact of what just happened. We've got a coordination problem, and this is not going to be good.
What about you, Dr. Weeks? Economics, finance, real estate, where does that fit in, and how did you see that documentary, or what did it bring up in you?
For me, when I watch it, I think about how completely unprepared we were for something of that magnitude. And when I think about the storm, literally in May of that year, I had given a talk to the chamber down on Fort Myers Beach about what was going on in the economy. And there was a lot of concern then about gentrification taking place. as we had property values escalating very rapidly and folks being forced off the beach, in particular the workforce being forced off. And as I look at what played out in the storm, that went from a very, really rapid process to one that was pretty much over, in that it wiped everything clean and the gentrification became complete with that one storm. Now, I'm not sure how we could have been prepared, but I know as I watch it, I think we were in no way prepared for this. And as I've watched the recovery play out, that's been reinforced over and over again, because if you look at the town of Fort Myers Beach and the struggles they've gone through trying to rebuild, the scale of the devastation is just such that it just overwhelmed them.
And as we've seen on Fort Myers Beach, because they have to rebuild to a high degree of height, if nothing else, it went from a hard place to live to an impossible place to live if you don't have a lot of money.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that with the businesses. So if you look at Fort Myers Beach right now, we're back to the point where we have less than 40% of the businesses on Fort Myers Beach have been able to reopen. And when you look at what they have to do just for the buildings and the cost associated with building to current code, the model that we were using economically before doesn't work. They have to have greater density in order to justify the expenditure required to meet current code. And unfortunately, that's going to mean a change in the character of the town of Fort Myers Beach and many of the other places that were impacted as well.
Yeah. So, Dr. Richards, ecology, environment, not necessarily economics, but I'm sure that fits in. What were you thinking when you were watching it?
So I'm probably one of the few people in this room that was not here during Hurricane Ian.
Were you out of town or just not here yet?
I was not here yet.
Oh, okay.
I was in the process of buying a house here, so that's a whole nother story that I'm not going to get into. But I accepted the job here in June of 22 and was planning on moving here in December. So I watched the place that I was coming to be completely changed. And it changed my approach to being here. It changed my plan for the research that I do. I was originally most interested in working in the cypress swamps. And when I arrived after Ian, I saw the work that needed to be done on our coastlines and started, stepped in a way that I could to do some of that work. So I've been on the beaches, at least a couple days out of every month, measuring plants, looking at how plants are regrowing, advising people in the communities that are doing restoration on the beaches, and kind of trying to figure out we were unprepared for the restoration work that needed to happen, as well as all of the human services part of it. Nobody had thought about what do we do when our beaches are destroyed, when our mangroves are destroyed. We had no plan in place for how to address those ecological issues. And we're learning now how we do that restoration. So I think that we can be better prepared in the future for future storms. But as they were talking about at the end, as Chris Landsey especially was talking about, as the sea level rises, that inundation with salt water is just going to get more and more frequent. And even from the ecological perspective, even small amounts of storm surge that may not have that much effect on infrastructure will be affecting our ecological communities.
A lot of our beaches it takes a lot of effort, even when there isn't a hurricane, to keep those there. Is that sustainable? In terms of the resilience of the things that people who come to Southwest Florida expect from a beach, not necessarily, in terms of a hurricane, but a hurricane really causes a lot of grief in that whole dynamic.
Yeah, so I watched the emergency berms go in after Hurricane Ian. I watched the emergency berms erode away. I've watched the sand get washed in from Helene and Milton and then get transported back out onto the beach. And then finally, we put some plants on top of that sand, which may help to hold it in place a little bit more permanently. But yeah, there's so much investment going into the sand, moving sand around on these beaches, taking it from offshore, bringing it out from inland mines that has all sorts of cascading impacts on, the quality of our roads and what's happening in those inland mines and what's happening with the benthic life offshore where we're taking that sand from. So this is the cost of keeping this vision of these beautiful beaches going, right?
So the underlying theme of our conversation is resiliency. Obviously, Ian was a storm like no other, or at least in modern times. So, I don't know is it possible to be resilient in the face of a storm to that degree from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that's still the best choice to make, to continuously invest in prevention, because if you prevent, then you're kind of mitigating against those recovery costs. We saw after Ian that there was about over $113 billion in property damages. We saw, insurance companies fleeing Southwest Florida. We've seen the premiums in Southwest Florida increasing and the valuations of the properties going down. But ultimately, I think this is probably the best way to respond, to continuously invest in those preventative measures, because for every dollar that is spent on prevention, communities are saving $6 to $13 in recovery costs. So I think that's still our best bet.
Can you give an example or two of the kinds of things that could be done in terms of preventative measures beforehand? And have any of them been done? If this wouldn't be a wake-up call to whoever policymakers are responsible for making those decisions, what would make that happen?
Yeah, so I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to answer this from an engineering point of view. Rather, from the economics point of view, I think part of the problem we have is we know about these storm surges coming. As we saw in the video, the forecast was very clear. I think it's not just about purely an engineering solution. It's also maybe the side that we don't pay a lot of attention to is the human behavior component, right? Because we knew about the storm surge coming, we saw it in the news, and yet there was still a significant number of people who did not evacuate. So we need the kind of policies that can respond to how people actually go about making decisions, right? To incentivize, to ensure that we can have more people evacuating, we can have more evacuation plans maybe that are more efficient, something along those lines. And obviously, from the engineering point of view, it's just a case of those building codes. How can we ensure that we see more adaptation of that? Obviously, the equity issues come into play, because as the building codes improve, along with that also comes the expense, right? What about the marginalized and the poor people who can afford this? Do we have policies that can be able to make those kind of building codes accessible to everyone else? I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah.
Mike, I
was going to skip Tom for you, so you read my mind.
Yeah, when we look at this, first of all, the points are spot on. When we look at the folks that are sort of at the margin, there are a lot of challenges there. And when you think of the experience coming out of Ian, we had about 60,000 people that were displaced following Ian just here in Lee County. And you think about the housing stock that was damaged, the majority of the damage was with older housing stock. And fortunately, we've got a couple of good programs in the state that are helping at the margin, okay? The My Safe Florida Home, the Elevate Florida Home. The problem is the scale. When you look at the housing stock and where so much of it is located in close proximity to these low-lying areas, we really need to do a lot more. But at the margin, those programs are helpful. And when we shift to the newer housing stock and you look at things that are built to the current code, those properties performed exceptionally well in the face of the storm. The things that were completed in the last 5 or 10 years, most of those properties had only cosmetic damage. And many times if they did have damage, it was because the older structure next to it was washed into it or something like that. So the code works and we're making steady progress building more resilient structures. But then we go back to the economics of it. It's very challenging. That cost factor changes dramatically when we try to build a truly resilient structure that you can put on a place like Fort Myers Beach and think it's going to make it safely through the storm.
From a real estate perspective, I mean, were you at all surprised that people continuously want to live in a place where a storm like Ian hit just a few years ago? Because obviously the demand to live where you can look at the Gulf hasn't gone away.
No, it really doesn't surprise me. I think for folks that were here that have gone through the trauma of the storms, if anything, I'm surprised that so many of us say, oh no, hell no, I'm staying here because I love this place, because it wears you out. I was lucky to get through the storm with just minor damage at our house, things that we could pay for out of pocket, a lot of inconvenience and a lot of cleanup. But it just wears you out. So if anything, I was kind of surprised that more folks didn't say, oh, heck, I'm done with this and I'm gone, especially following the storms in 24, when they boom, boom, right back to back. But the demand from others to come in and live in paradise and have access to what we have here, especially when you look at the level of wealth in the country, the folks that can come here and afford to spend $500+ a square foot to build a home on their piece of paradise, no, it doesn't surprise me.
Tom, we have an older than average population in Southwest Florida, I think would be a one way to put it. Can you talk some about the challenges that presents in terms of being able to be resilient from a human services level?
Yeah, I think when we look at resilience from that perspective, obviously we look at population. And so obviously older adults, they're going to be more susceptible. We had a lot of stories coming out after Ian of older adults who were trapped in their homes, not unlike the story that comes up in the documentary. And unfortunately, with a lot of the same results. I think part of that goes to the obvious needs of the older adult, the lack of individuals wanting to evacuate was clearly an issue. And in some cases, it wasn't a lack of desire to evacuate, it was the lack of ability to evacuate. A lot of our older adults do not have the types of resources around them. They don't have the family around them to make those kind of trips. We also, when we look at the resiliency piece, I wanted to touch back on that for a second because, I spent 18 months on the Resiliently piece that Commissioner Ruane put together afterwards. And I sat in these meetings and we talked a lot about building codes and economics and infrastructure and those pieces. And very little did we ever hear things about the social services side of things, which I think is critically important to that resilience piece. If people are not familiar, we live in a healthcare desert by and large. And one of the biggest places we see that is with mental health. We have 900 residents on average for every one mental health professional across Southwest Florida. So when you talk about the trauma after the storms and you look at that piece in terms of the recovery effort, our investment needs to be broad and wide, right? It needs to be in looking at changing building code and how we're bringing pieces up, how we're looking at our environmental aspects so that we don't have as severe flooding. We have to look at it from an economic perspective, but we also can't forget that there's a human component in all of this that underlies everything else that we're talking about in this regard.
Dr. Richards, you're fairly new to the community, so you see it with sort of fresher eyes. Like what, besides the coast, because you can do certain things to the coast to make it absorb energy with a storm coming ashore, but when you look at our 4-county region, are there things that you think could be done that you might say were the lowest hanging fruit, or has the way we have built and evolved over the past 80 years put us in a position where that makes it extremely difficult?
I think both things are true. I think that the way that we've built has made things very difficult. I think that we've degraded a lot of our natural systems that would offer us some protection already. So along the coast, we've pretty much built on top of the natural dune system that would provide some protection against that incoming surge. On the backside, we've cut down a lot of the mangroves to make room for more development. The mangroves would absorb some of that floodwater coming in from the backside. Along the rivers, also, we're building right along the rivers, and some of that natural floodplain is no longer there to absorb water for us. It's going into homes instead. So all of that is true, but I do think that we have a lot of opportunities in terms of restoration of these natural systems that would give us some buffer and some additional ecosystem services from doing what we term nature-based solutions, or kind of working with the natural resilience of nature to these kinds of events to help protect our human communities.
Is it possible to plant mangroves in places where we expect there to be problems somewhat over the horizon, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that I talk about with some of my colleagues a lot is, the natural distribution of some of these ecosystems is shifting as sea level rises and as climate warms. And so we have to think ahead. We have to not only be migrating our human communities in some cases, but thinking about how we help to migrate our natural communities so that they can persist and continue to protect us.
Other than raising all of our houses, no, it's a rock and a hard place. It's kind of like affordable housing. It's like a house is worth what the market will bear. So if you're going to sell it for less, you have to figure out somebody who's going to pick up that other thing. We've seen with that storm with Ian, that's probably, hopefully, the worst case scenario. We've only got 17 more days, by the way, until hurricane season ends this year. So knock on wood. But, from an environmental economics perspective, we can do things to try to have, like you talked about, the human, mentality part of it. But, is there a way to, I guess the big question is there a way to live in this part of the world and not just to have those sorts of things happen occasionally and suffer the consequences for it?
Yeah, so I think, we need to find a balance between sort of, nature-based solutions, which I think there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to that. I think we figured that we would sort of always find an engineering solution to this. I think it doesn't matter how many hard structures we put out there. We have to maybe rethink in terms of paying attention also to nature-based solutions, things like mangroves, how they can slow these storm surges and things like that. And I think we also need to do a better job in terms of assessing whether all these evacuation plans and things work, because we are just assumed that these things work, right? We have to evaluate whether these evacuation plans and all these things we have in place, how did they fare against Hurricane Ian and other hurricanes, so that if there's room for improvement, we need to, be able to improve them accordingly. And then I think one of the things, so I'm working on a couple of projects where we are looking at the impacts of hurricanes on migration, on labor, how it affects economic activities. We're looking at restoration efforts. For example, we've seen in Naples, Collier County, and Lee County, where we would have, Hurricane Ian and other similar hurricanes. We see the beaches the sand being wiped out. You see trucks and after trucks coming in, delivering all these sand and millions of dollars being spent on this. A few months later, all that is gone, right? So I think we need to rethink more effective way and find a solution, or rather a balance between engineering and nature-based. And I think that would go a long way.
Tom, I know you're a data guy. I know you're a mapping guy. Did you learn anything from this storm? I mean, did it teach us anything that we didn't know about which populations were at most risk for this kind of thing, or surprises where we didn't think that area would be at risk?
Yeah, first I want to say Shelton and I did affordable housing last week. So if you're interested in that panel, you can go check that out. But what did we learn? I don't know how much the data taught us that we didn't know about as much as the experiences taught us. The fact that our human service, nonprofit, government connection was so absolutely weak to the point that we had no connection between counties, right? That was a major problem. I think part of that you see in the documentary. I think we may have skipped that one part with the phone call that goes into the dispatch, and the woman saying, we have nobody out there and we can't do anything. We know that when that hit Lee County, it shut down Lee County's call center, and they had to route Lee County calls to Collier County. And so now you've got dispatch operators in Collier County taking calls from people in Lee County saying, I think I'm about to drown, right? And the impact that puts on that type of a situation. So I think the big thing that we learned didn't have anything to do with data or maps or anything like that. What it had to do with was the fact that in the reality of these situations, we were so woefully underprepared for a community that we talk all the time that it's not if, it's when, right? And we know that's going to be the case again. So I think what we learned is we have a lot more to learn, right? We have a lot more we have to put in place. We have to do better at coordination. We have to be better at communication. Our responses need to be better targeted. If there's one thing that I take as a silver lining out of this documentary, from not a personal point of pride, but as a university and a program point of pride, is I watch that video and I sit there and I go, that's an alum, that's an alum, that's an alum. And I can pick these people off and know that these are individuals that have been through it. They've been properly trained, and they are taking these roles now because they don't want this to be the situation that they went through and that they experienced, both as students and professionals, and they want it to be a better situation moving forward.
I'm an alum. Dr. Weeks, is there our economy, tourism, service economy, agriculture, ranching, those are the kind of the main things. Does that make us particularly susceptible, to both in terms of what we experience during a storm, but more importantly, how we are able or have the people to help rebuild afterwards?
Well, when you think about the labor market and what happened in the wake of Ian, a lot of our folks that were in the service industry were directly impacted. A lot of the folks that were in the construction industry, the folks that we needed to help us recover, to put the pieces back together, many of them lost their homes. So I think when you look at the composition of the workforce here, realize that they're the ones that are most likely to be in some of that older substandard housing stock, I think it does put us at greater risk. And again, makes the programs like My Safe Florida Home or Elevate Florida that much more appropriate. But we've got to figure out a way to cover the masses here, because those are the folks we need in the immediate wake of the storm to get the pieces put back together.
Dr. Mike Martin, President Emeritus now, he told me he was on and you may have been even involved, it was some sort of post-Ian economic thing, and he said that the labor participation rate in Southwest Florida or Lee County is like 50%, meaning like 1 out of 2 people you see driving down the road is retired or not working. And he said that was creating a huge challenge. Even if you had the resources to find people to rebuild, finding people was a problem.
Yeah, when you look at the composition of the population, when we attract a lot of wealthy retirees here, they require a large quantity of services of every type. So as a result, they're not in the workforce. Instead, they're here consuming a lot of those services. So that makes our ability to respond to things like this a bit more challenging.
Mike, real quick, because I think that's a great point. And I think another piece that did come from the panel that we had, we had one of the Collier County growth management people that has talked about the fact that 63,000, I think they said, individuals commute into Collier County on a daily basis for work, right? So now you think about that aspect, that when that hits Lee County and that's affecting that population is not going into Collier, right, for that workforce piece. So then you've got that extra limitation on top of everything else. And then the inability for those businesses to be able to help their employees who are now outside of that. So you've got this very odd dynamic in that way that does come back to partly that affordable housing piece of people not being able to afford to live where they work.
Dr. Richards, I did a show a few years ago on a living shorelines project up in the armpit, I guess. I don't know if that's what you call it.
Tell them you're calling.
Yeah, the Big Bend region, I think they call it. But it was several years into the study. They got hit almost directly by a hurricane. It showed a significant ability to withstand the storm damage, but I don't think that was being built on an area like our coast, which is where people live. Because of the way we are on our coast and because of the beaches, does that just make it inherently harder, if not impossible, to create a proper living shoreline that is sort of designed to withstand storms? Is that an answerable question?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the characteristics of our shoreline here that I don't think they really have in the Big Bend region is our barrier islands. And a lot of our development is on our barrier islands. So a barrier island is sand. It's not meant to stay in one place. It's meant to shift around and move over time. And that's not compatible with our human development that we have on our barrier islands. So these are systems that would naturally be moving and shifting, and we've put buildings on top of them to prevent them and are actively working to prevent them from moving and shifting, resculpting our shorelines, our beaches, bringing in sand from other places. But I do think that there are opportunities still there to reinforce some of the natural systems that still exist on those islands and would have historically existed on those islands. Mangroves are particularly important. And we can do mangrove restoration. We've got sort of a continuum, right? So we've got offshore, we need the seagrasses and the oyster beds that diminish the wave force as it's first coming in. On the coastline, we need the dune system, and ideally we would have a series of several dunes. The place that we really have a good example of that is on Sanibel, whereas on the rest of the coast, we've built much closer to the ocean front. But I think there are places where we can start to put into place some of those. And as Johane mentioned before, maybe combining that with some engineered solutions is where we need to head in the longer term.
If money was no object, I'm going to go back to you, Johane. What could we do if money was no object? And then I want to ask, like, what is the object, or what is prohibiting us from doing it? I know that's none of us really know the answer to that exactly, but if money was no object, like, how could we make this community from Charlotte County to Naples as resilient as possible in the face of a storm like Ian?
Yeah, so I think the simple answer here would be to all the old sort of inventory that's already there in terms of housing, to obviously get them up to code. Because as I think Shelton mentioned earlier, the building codes, the newer codes, they're performing much better, right?
Are these the codes from Hurricane Andrew? Is that the?
Yes, that's when we had the major step forward.
The way back in the 1990 or something was when we wound up with the new codes, but older homes don't have the.
I think that would be one of the obvious ways, and then you could have programs where, certain obvious areas people could be kind of prohibited from moving into those areas, maybe relocate, because relocating people also costs money, right? Where you could buy back, you could have the state buying back some land, and see in some places it's not really a good place for people to live there, no matter how much money you throw at it. And obviously you need to compensate people for that, and to continuously evaluate how the various sort of emergency and evacuation initiatives or programs are performing. Because I don't know how old are these evacuation plans and things like that. People take it as given that simply by implementing them, things will work, right? And maybe put more resources to also understanding the human behavior aspect, to understand what would it take to make people to kind of respond during emergencies to things like evacuation and enhance the evacuation plans and things like that. So I think that those would be the places, if money wasn't an issue, where obvious places to kind of invest in those areas.
How much did you say the economic impact from Ian was? You said it was
over $113 billion in Florida. Then in Southwest Florida, having insurance companies moving out, having paying more for flood insurance, but your value of your property is going down. Surely you can see how this doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, so those are the challenges. And having the, low income people, affected in this way, in such a manner that they can't be able to go to work. They don't have, how many people don't have flood insurance, for example? What happens to these people after you have disasters? Because if you don't have insurance, you don't have, or you are poor, lower income, you don't have the luxury to evacuate. You don't have the luxury to relocate somewhere. You have no payout from any insurance. Your life is ruined, right? So those would be the kind of places to really invest in.
Is there a point at which, and this might be for you, Dr. Weeks, or anybody, is there a point at which it becomes, we become uninsurable in certain areas in Southwest Florida?
Yeah, I think so. At some point when you look at certain risk, they're just not worth assuming. And I hate to throw FEMA out there as an example of being right, because I apologize if anybody hears from FEMA, but they get plenty wrong. And when you look at their policies associated with, say, the FEMA 50% rule and the way they deal with special flood hazard areas and repetitive loss structures, one of their goals, the overriding goals with those policies, is to make sure that we don't continue to build back in areas where you're just going to have loss after loss after loss.
Explain the 50% rule and just real quickly for people who don't know.
The Reader's Digest version of that, for the people old enough to know what Reader's Digest version is. So when you look at the FEMA 50% rule, basically what it says is that in order for a community to be able to participate in the National Flood Insurance program, they have to have a floodplain management program in place. 50% rule is how they operationalize that. If you have a structure that's located in a special flood hazard area and it has damage that exceeds 50% of the depreciated value of the structure prior to the event, then it has to be brought completely up to code. So for most structures, that would mean they'd have to be torn down and rebuilt.
Tom, from your perspective, if money was no object, what would you wave your magic wand and
Yeah, what I think I'd like to see is something that we talked about during that Resiliency task force that we participated in, which is resiliency hubs. This is something we don't have a lot of in our community. The idea behind a resiliency hub is that it is a known entity in your community that can be utilized in blue sky and gray sky days, right? So the blue sky days, it's providing services, it's, providing education in the community. And then gray skies during after disasters, individuals know that facility from the blue sky days to go back there to get that support. We talked a lot about resiliency hubs when we were going through the Resiliently task force. I think United Way, Jeannie Joy, is actually taking that initiative on. But one of the things that we quickly identified was we don't have a lot of really great places to serve as those locations, right? We talk a lot about older adults. There are 5 senior centers in Southwest Florida, right? And by Southwest Florida there, I'm saying Collier and Lee County. That's it, 5, right? So, and they are not equipped to handle something like this. After Hurricane Ian and after the tornadoes in Iona, we set up what we called a MARC, a multi-agency resource center, which was the idea that Shelton came up, hit on here with. We started with Lee County employees and getting them serviced and making sure that they were there, because we knew those were the individuals we needed back out on the streets to help with the recovery efforts. So we started with them, brought the agencies in. But when we did that after the tornado, we had to set up in a gym in a school, in a middle school. After Ian, we were on the 3rd floor of a non-used building. It wasn't very accessible. So we don't have a lot of that. I wish our Lee County and Collier County commissioners would go up to Charlotte County and get a look at what's up there called the Family Support Center. That is basically a MARC every single day, right? That's what it's designed for. It's designed to support the community. It is well situated in the center of a community, so it's very easily accessible. So that's what I think we need. We need more focus on those types of locations so that people know where to go in the event of that disaster and where they can get proper services.
We, after Ian, every year since that, right before the beginning of the hurricane season at WGCU, we've made it a thing we're going to do from now on. We call it a Blue Sky Summit. We bring in emergency management people from all of our counties. We get around a huge table, and we all try to get to know each other, because building those human relationships beforehand makes it so much more important. And while I'm at it, one of the great things, if you could say there was a great thing about Ian, was the help that every human gave every other human in a time and place in this country where there's a lot of partisanship, and you didn't see that after Ian. So, if there's a lesson we can learn, it's maybe that.
And I agree. One of the benefits for us, one of the silver linings looking at older adults, was we hosted a older adult emergency management summit here in this building by bringing together all of those organizations, because the thing was, when I'm saying, we were woefully underprepared, that's just not me saying that. That was the nonprofits looking at each other and being honest with themselves and going, man, we did not do a great job here, right? Showing up at the same locations with the same exact services and not coordinating that, and then getting on site and then kind of point, well, no, you do it. Well, no, you do. Well, we were here first. No. there's a whole nother community over there that needs help. Somebody just pack up and go, right? That's the type of thing that we need. We need that level of leadership. And I think you're right, Mike, by getting groups together, having those conversations, being honest about what the performance was so we don't repeat that in the future is part of the important piece.
Shelton, I'm going to give you the, I don't know if it's fair to ask you as an economist, but, if money was no object, what could we do to make us as safe as possible in the face of a storm like that?
I think that I would have mandatory inspections and require folks to have a minimum level of safety for structures before you CO'd them. So bring everything up to as close to the current standard as you possibly could and have those inspected so that folks have absolute confidence in the structure that they're going to try to shelter in. Because when you look at older housing stock, there's just so many issues there that I would try to make that the number one priority.
Is that, you think, like realistic on any level?
No.
That's okay. I asked you the magic wand question. I asked you the magic wand question. So, okay. What about you, Dr. Richards? If you had a magic wand and you could create some sort of systems, whether along the coast or inland, the way we move water around, things like that, like what would be the best thing we could do to, make the impact as minimal as possible on us humans?
I think that is some of these most vulnerable locations, like they talked in the film there, somebody said that we're going to get to a point where we can't mitigate the problem away in some locations. And we're going to get closer and closer to that in various places. And some places are more vulnerable than others in terms of damage that they will incur from these storms. So what I would like to see, what my magic wand vision would be, is turning some of those places proactively back to nature. And that would, of course, involve buying out land on a large scale and getting people to relocate, which is probably not a realistic vision. But I think that would give us space to build back some of that natural infrastructure that would provide better protection for the human infrastructure that we do decide we can mitigate and keep.
Can I just jump in on that? When you look at that, no, it's probably not realistic from an economic standpoint to do that on a large scale, but I think it has to be part of the answer.
Yeah.
When you look at some of these places where you've got the extreme bowling effects and stuff like that, really close to the coast, we're going to get to the point where it doesn't make sense to keep throwing money into those communities very quickly. And the best thing to do will be to help get those folks into a safe location and safe structures.
Hurricane Charlie was 2004, and it wasn't till, it was almost from Charlie to Ian where we had an event that was that serious, and it makes people complacent. You forget. Obviously, I joked we only have 17 days of hurricane season left, and it would be great to make it through the entire season without an event. But, each year that goes by without one is just make it harder. Do we have to strike while the memory is recent, I guess, in terms of taking action?
Absolutely. We're human beings. We forget things, that memory fades. And next thing you know, somebody's staying when they need to go. And I can tell you, my wife and I stayed at home for Helene and realized at about 8 o'clock that night that we should have left. Went outside to walk the dog, and we had 1.5 feet of water in the street in front of the house. We both drive Hondas. There's no way we're getting out of there now. So that was a very long night. And Ian wasn't that long ago. But let me tell you, that really reinforced it. When Milton came along, I was down the street.
I was going to say, did you leave for Milton? Does anybody have any questions in the audience?
Dr. Felke, you were talking just a moment ago about coordination with the nonprofit social services and the county governments. Is there any sort of county nonprofit partnership coordination with larger scale, like national response groups like Team with Convos and American Red Cross, on taking best practices, learnings from that to mobilize here?
Yeah, that'd be great. No. to capture Shelton's speech, no. We're getting better, right? I don't want it to be a complete negative. We're getting better. I just don't think we're there yet. We're still trying to figure out exactly what we need, right? You saw Katie Eck, who's leading the unmet need long-term recovery group. That's still going, right? I'm part of that group too. And so we still have a lot of work to do from there. And so while we are still trying to figure out what do we do when the next one of these things comes, we're also still trying to figure out how to recover from where we are. And so we just don't have the mechanisms right now to be at that level. So we are trying to learn as much as we can. We are trying to get better at the coordination. I've seen improvements in both Collier and Lee County. I think Lee County putting together their Ready Lee app, I think is going to be an improvement over some of the communications issues that we had in the past. But there's still a lot we need to learn and that we need to bring together. I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel. The idea of the Resiliency Hub is a national idea. So I was glad to see that come here, but we haven't fully realized it. So again, we still have a little way to go.
Yeah, and maybe to that point, I think, we probably also need plans beyond just the counties individually. You need a plan from all, let's say, if we're just to focus on Southwest Florida, probably all the counties getting together and having a plan. And in that plan, having scenarios, contingencies where if communications are down in one county, how does one kick in, right? So I think that would be one of what's required to improve things in the future.
On Dr. Richards, I think one, Dr. Weeks is the kind of intersection between the two, suggests that it's not practical and not economical to move development out of areas that are now impacted. One thing we probably can do is identify places that we shouldn't build in the future. That is, we can think what's 20, 50 years down the line, or maybe next year. Rather than attempt the impossible to undo decisions made 50 years ago, do we have the political will, or what levers do we have to try to point out that there are places right now where we can choose not to develop? Maybe the coastline, not so much, but there's plenty of inland flooding that in places like DeSoto County was mentioned with Dome and other places where planning now can avoid some of the problems in the future. Do we have levers to influence decisions to do that?
Yeah, I think that's why it will be important to kind of be proactive. Maybe this is something we need to do in the academic environment. Maybe undertake some studies where we could show what the benefit cost analysis looks like. Where you invest in preventing people from moving there versus what the cost would be if people were to move there. I think those are some of the things, the kind of insight that we need to generate, that kind of knowledge and share it with the policymakers. Because at the end of the day, it's a benefit cost. If you don't show them what's the cost and what's the benefit, the developers are always going to win in terms of every place is not going to be out of reach for them, right? So that's probably something we have to do on the academic side.
I think to go along with that, too, to the extent that we can come up with policies where we can incentivize property owners, if they're going to add to the structures or development they've got in a given area, to do it in a manner that's going to make it less susceptible to flooding or to wind. I think that's really important. I mean, one of the few things we can bank on in economics is that incentives work. And if we can come up with the right incentive structure then there's going to be a lot of value associated with that. When you think about the political will to make hard decisions and stop the path of development, as a real estate guy, I want to tell you that's probably, that's a big ask. But I think at the individual level, if we can come up with the right incentives, we can really shape behavior and hopefully get a lot better outcomes.
Yeah, so my name's Chris. I'm with Keep the County Beautiful. We're a nonprofit here in the county. And I just joined back in October. My role is litter prevention and education, specifically for the Lehigh area, which is still unincorporated, really hard to reach. But moving forward, we're a small team of 5, I was speaking with my director a few weeks back, and she said that Ian was one of those situations that kind of put us back on the map. We were having a lot of difficulty with community engagement and funding, during a period of time. I really do love the idea of incentivizing some sort of land acquisition to be restored later on down the line. Do you think it would be feasible to work with Conservation 2020 for Lee County, or what they're doing in Cape Coral, Friends of Wildlife, where they're buying out some lots for gopher tortoise or burrowing owl, conservation? Do you think that would be feasible down here? I know you kind of touched on that, but moving forward, how can a small group like us get more community engagement and really touch, people who may be old and not in the workforce, but still want to help out where they can?
Sure. I think at the margin, you can definitely have an impact. What I would advise you to do is try to be very targeted so that you can lever the resources you have to actually have a profound impact. And I think that those programs really have a lot of potential to have that positive, lasting impact on the community.
Dodged a couple bullets in 2025, primarily because those storms took a northeast trajectory. Do you have a sense of why that happened this year? Has it happened to that extent in the past?
I think that's above our pay grade.
So Miller already left the room.
I'll give you the statistical answers. They're statistically independent events, so the fact that you get hit one year or maybe multiple times in a year, it really has nothing to do with what's going to happen the following year. So you get back to what our meteorologist, Matt Devin, was saying. You just can't base it on what happens with those other storms because there's so many factors that steer the storms and things like that. Some years we're going to get lucky. Other years, look out.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I grew up here. I watched a lot of storms not hit us, over the years. So, but then all of a sudden it seemed like they wouldn't stop. Yes, sir. Yeah.
River flooding. This big flooding after this 27th flood line. Well, I would be worried about that at this time. I had neighbors who, they're just very good, and they were in world, and they said as soon as the wind force moved down, it was really flushed for them. All in the storm surges went out. If we have river pressure coming down, we're in trouble. The flooding is going to continue, the northern counties. I think it's really important that we pursue upriver strategies. Have it in Holland. They've always great stuff for each surges, but they get big rain inland and they get flooding from the inland.
No, that's an important point. And if you look at the experience following Irma, where we had that through the Bonita area, we got exactly that sort of outcome down here. Where you had the Imperial River suddenly just pushing an amazing amount of water, where the majority of that storm was east of us. So you got all the rainfall there, and then it flooded like crazy here as that water made its way towards the coast. So it's definitely something that has to be considered in the big picture, something that you could get somebody smarter than the real estate guy to answer.
Anyone else want to take a crack at that or asking that?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's happening is these hurricanes are not only getting coming maybe more frequently or getting stronger in terms of the wind velocity, but they're getting larger in terms of diameter, and they're often moving slowly. And so that rain just sits there. So we've got the surge coming in from the coast that meets the rainfall that's running off of the land. And yeah, that gives you a big problem with flooding along the rivers. I think we need to be really conscious of the decisions that we're making about construction in those river floodplains, thinking about hurricanes, not just along the coast. I live in Bonita Springs near the Imperial River, and I've been watching construction happen on a project downtown there that I think is a great example of a very bad idea of what we could do on the river, where they're basically channelizing the river in downtown Bonita Springs, where they're going to build a new development and they'll have about 8-foot high walls on either side of the river. What that's going to do when that river overflows is it's going to push all of that water into the surrounding neighborhoods and create even worse flooding problems in those neighborhoods. What that development is replacing is a big empty lot that would just absorb a lot of that flood water in past storms in Ian and in Irma.
Did you have a question?
Since there could be like other places around the world experience hurricanes or like hurricane events in the Pacific, there could be like light here, Southwest Florida.
I don't know if any of you all have the answer to that question or not.
I think there are always lessons to be learned when you have situations like that. You know, I know the folks in the building industry are always looking at the experience with different techniques and different materials when you have wind and rain events. And that technology continues to get better as a result of that. But we've always got to learn from what's happening somewhere else, whether it's here in Florida or somewhere else in the U.S. or around the world.
We need to figure out a way to change our culture so we look out into the distant future. That would be easy, right?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. As human beings, we tend to discount, the $5,000 that you have to spend now on hurricane-proof windows or shutters is something that we dread as compared to losing out $500,000 loss on a property. So that's one of the challenges, and that's one of the things that we also need to do a better job of seeing how to kind of incentivize so that we can make better choices away from always those kind of default choices that as human beings we tend to just behave in that way.
Well, we're pretty much coming up to the end here. Do any of you all have any things that you would like to bring up or point out that I haven't thought to ask or we haven't come across? Well, then, thank you all for being here. Oh, one follow-up.
Somebody represented the microecon side of this construction industry. Maybe some representative from the technical colleges. Speak the trades, review this.
We'll lean on our colleagues in the construction management program and make sure we get one of those folks in here next time.
Yeah.
Done deal.
Well, thank you all for being here. And, thank you, Tom, for the documentary. We stayed on the air all the way through Ian. We lived in the building for 2 weeks afterwards. So support your local public radio station. And thank you all for being here.